Right. We can dive right in. I know many of you, this is not your first session. I just have a few housekeeping items before we get to the good stuff here. Thank you all for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking time out of your busy lives and work schedules to be a part of this session. This one is a unique one in that it's a panel and a discussion based. So before I pass over the mic to a whole great crew of folks, I just want to remind everyone that this is being recorded. It will be posted on our website next week at the latest. All session attendees are on mute and off camera, but we do encourage you to use the Whova app to use the chat function and Q&A to engage in this session. Don't hesitate to reach out and ask questions throughout the session. And then if you have any issues, you can email us at marketing@carnegiehighered.com, or you can also message us in the Whova app through the Ask Organizers Anything section of the community board. So without further ado, this session, the Grad Enrollment Management Landscape, a NAGAP discussion, I'm going to pass it on over to my colleague, Kevin Rohn.
Thank you, Kelsey. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining this session. As Kelsey said, I'm Kevin Rohn. I'm the Senior Director of Client Success with Carnegie and a former Director of Grad Admissions. So this session is certainly near and dear to my heart. Yes, exactly, Jeremiah. So before we get started, I'm going to be the moderator here. I'm going to have the group do some introductions. So ladies first, I'm going to have Naranda come off mute and introduce yourself, and then you could pass it to Ryan or Jeremiah.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Naranda Wright. I am the Director of Graduate Admissions Operations at Augusta University. I also serve as the Vice President for NAGAP's National Board, as well as Chair of the DEI Committee, and work with the Annual Conference Committee. Been in higher education about 16 years now, all graduates, so I'm excited to be here with you today.
Ryan, you want to go next?
Can do. Thanks, Kevin. My name is Ryan Tallgren. I am the Assistant Dean for Enrollment Management in the University of Buffalo's Graduate School of Education. I'm the membership chair for NAGAP as well. I've been on the graduate side of graduate enrollment side of higher ed for about a decade now. I'm about 12 years in higher ed total. So glad to be here, and thanks, Kevin.
Awesome. And Jeremiah.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jeremiah Nelson. I am the past president and treasurer of NAGAP, and I have been working in higher ed for, I brace for it when I say it, 25 years this year. Most of that graduate enrollment management. A couple of years ago, I switched over to the faculty side. So I'm teaching in the Kettner School of Business at Catawba College as my primary gig as a tenure track faculty member. And also serve in, like you do in small colleges, a couple of administrative roles. I'm the director of the MBA and the director of the Bachelor of Business Administration online program. So happy to be with you guys.
Excellent. Thank you all. Well, we could dive right in. We got some great questions here, and certainly, as Kelsey said, for those that are attending, if you have questions, there's a chat feature, I believe, that you can use to insert some questions. So for the group, one of the big topics that has been in the news is the ruling from the Supreme Court on affirmative action. So question for you all is, how has that impacted your recruitment and admissions, specifically in your grad areas on your campus? So whoever wants to jump in first, be my guest.
I'll get started. So thanks,
Sure.
Kevin. So I will frame this in a few important ways, right? Number one, I work at a state institution in the state of New York, right? So that's a public institution. So number one is that we're thinking about recruitment and admissions very separately, right? I'm in an academic unit within a large research institution, right? So we've gotten very clear guidance from both the university and from the State University of New York, the SUNY Legal Counsel on what to do or not to do, right? Mm-hmm. When it comes to admissions, one very practical thing that I'm working on currently is that we're ensuring that our faculty or our reviewers, as they're going through the applications, do not see race, ethnicity data, right, during the admissions review process. That is a tangible component that has been, shared widely and clearly in trainings that we've gotten. When we talk about recruitment, however, nothing has changed. We are still trying to find a diverse, broadly represented pool of applicants to be considered for our graduate programs, regardless of ability status, race, ethnicity, gender, you name it. So nothing has changed in terms of our mission and vision of what we're trying to do when we're recruiting locally, globally, internationally, to make sure we have as competitive and diverse of a pool of applicants across programs as possible.
Yeah, excellent. Anybody else want to jump in? Miranda, I saw you come off mute.
Yes, like Ryan, I'm at a state institution as well, within the University Systems of Georgia. And the same thing, legal counsel has given us clear definitions of what we can and can't do, what we can and can't ask. We are still with our from the application side, because I work on the admission side, we have removed that information from the application. So when programs are reviewing applications for admission consideration, they don't see that. We are still trying to work on how to figure out how to remove that from queries, because if they query something, they can still find it within the application system, because we are still asking it because we have to report it.
Sure.
So I'm just kind of figuring out how we frame that and make sure that it's not something that could potentially be used in the admissions process. So that's what we're dealing with now at Augusta University, because we got an email from legal that gave us a breakdown of everything. And then my assistant vice president, he shared information with me as far as what we need to do as far as the application system. So we're working with our application vendor to make sure that we have that process pulled out and it's not readily available on the application for faculty and staff.
The only thing I think I would add is just from a holistic perspective, most schools, it should not necessarily have a day-to-day operational impact, because most schools are not highly selective schools. Something like 85+% of schools, are not going to necessarily have an affirmative action kind of impact to their enrollment necessarily. It's more kind of about compliance and making sure that you're following the rules and in a demonstrated way. But I do think there is something, well, I guess the other point is the ruling was related to undergraduate admissions. So as we look at how, it would be extrapolated to graduate, we are in many ways guessing because it's not explicit in the legal ruling. So that's kind of an important factor, I guess. But also, I think it has put pressure on all of us to pay even more attention. I think all of us on this call, and probably many of you that are out there in the audience, care deeply about the diversity of our class, the value that having different perspectives brings to the student experience, that how it prepares students for the future world. Those are the kinds of questions that we get from students as they think about kind of where they want to go to school. But the pressure that it puts on all of us to just be even more vigilant on the recruitment side of things, to be in places where diverse candidates are going to be, to reach them in a really intentional way, that we make sure that they know that they are welcome, that they are appreciated, that they are valued, that this is a community that they can thrive in, that there are support structures in place, all of those kinds of things that we've done all along, but as the kind of message goes out into the world that can be interpreted in lots of different ways, we want to make sure that our diverse candidates, all of our candidates, from all of their backgrounds, know that that each of our institutions is a place that they can thrive, and that they are not being excluded or not wanted for any reason or no reason whatsoever. So.
Yeah, Jeremiah, you touched on this a little bit, but and curious to hear this from others. Are you all getting any questions about this from prospective students? Are they, as you talk to them through the admissions process, whether they call or shoot you an email, are you getting questions about any of this?
It's a great question, Kevin. I want to jump in. So I was at a graduate school fair yesterday and actually talking about one of our specific programs where the program's personal statement specifically asks you to speak to your experiences working with individuals from backgrounds different than yourself, right? You interpret that how you want. And the student asks, what do I write on that? And they asked, is that new? And I was explicit that has been a statement and a value of our institution since well before any Supreme Court ruling. So you could have applied in fall 23, fall 22, fall 21, would have had the exact same question. So kind of removed the assumption that is a response to something, and tried to kind of support the student in thinking about how to answer that personal statement prompt as clearly as possible based on what their work they want to do is, not who they are necessarily as a person, because that's what it's asking. So yes, getting questions, but also acknowledging that our commitment to diversity has been there. Our commitment to supporting diverse populations is not a new or a response to anything either.
Right. Anybody else want to? I see
Yeah,
Rhonda. There you go.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I haven't personally gotten those questions about any of the grad programs that I have. I have a friend from high school that was interested in a grad program and it's not offered at my institution. It's offered at a previous institution I worked at. And that was her question, like, are they looking for diverse people in this program? Because it is a selective program. It's a licensure program, so it is very selective in that program. And she was like, should I waste my time even applying for this program? I'm like, if this is what you want to do, I mean, they're not going to say, hey, we need a Mexican, or we need a Black person, or we need this person or that person. Like they're looking for a diverse group of people to fill their class. So absolutely apply. So people are thinking about it.
Sure.
They don't know how to ask it or who to ask and what to say and things like that. But they are curious about it because it's been blasted all over the news for quite a while now.
Right.
So they are asking and they're curious about it. So I just think we as grad admissions or graduate enrollment management professionals need to encourage students, like diversity is not new. It's not something that just popped up. We have been doing this and we're looking for it. And that's what we want on our campuses, because our campuses should be representative of any student that's on our campus in some way. So.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Jeremiah, did you want to add anything there?
I think only just to say, I'm not really getting specific questions about affirmative action, but belonging is always something that students are trying to find a good match, a good fit. And I think, if your campus has a history and a culture of valuing diversity, it probably is already coming through in your marketing materials and your webpage and all of those kinds of things. But I think I just mentioned this to say it may be a good opportunity to do an audit and to be, with a critical eye evaluating for that specific messaging to make sure that you're really explicit about how you value diversity and how that experience plays out in a student experience.
Are your offices doing anything in regard to support or providing resources to underrepresented students? You may or may not at this stage, but are any of your offices doing anything in that respect?
I'll just say, I think our infrastructure was already kind of built to support diverse students. So I don't know that we've done anything new or different. But creating community and ways for people to be able to connect based on the commonalities or the shared interests that they have has always been something that we value. So that's not new, but we're certainly trying to put it forward so people know how to easily access it.
Yeah, and I would say, like Jeremiah said, it's nothing new, but being intentional about making sure that students know that it's available and what we offer. So there are programs that offer, and a lot of times, like being on campuses, whether it's undergrad and grad, the focus is typically on undergrad students, but also being intentional about letting our grad students know, it's like, hey, this is available for you as well. It's not just for undergrad students.
Yeah, one of the things in the School of Education, right? One of the things specifically that we're working on, or we do. So our virtual open house is coming up in a few weeks, and we reach out to some student groups in our school to present or have kind of open conversation. We have a committee on social justice and inclusion, a student-run group that picks topics that reach far and wide in terms of ability status, race, ethnicity, LGBTQ orientation, you name it, right? So we make sure that students who might want to talk to others who find those values important, or who want to connect with folks who are like them, can talk to those individuals. And again, to Jeremiah and Rhonda's point, that's not new, but it's important to ensure that we are proactive in letting folks know they are going to have connections that can help their identity status and finding themselves somewhere, and that they're not tokenized, right? You're not the only person who might feel or identify in a certain way, and ensuring that we can connect you with folks before you've made a decision to enroll here, so that you're not surprised by things throughout the process. So really, that post-admit, pre-start of classes time becomes more important than ever, especially, I'm thinking about that personally, to ensure that that's where the resources and support get ramped up, so that students feel that they are represented appropriately in a graduate school experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to switch gears just a little bit to another hot topic that has been talked about in admissions, is AI. Have you all experienced any AI in any impactful ways within your graduate admissions offices or on your campus?
I will share two anecdotes in terms of what we're doing or what we've done as we're thinking about this. The first is an internal one. I worked with my assistant director of admission or enrollment communications in my office, because we had a new program. We needed to get some kind of marketing things together, make the drip campaign communications, so that as we get inquiries, they've got a number of messages to get. One approach is to copy some old ones, change the language, right? And I said, hold on, let's put this into Chat GPT, what we want, and let's see what happens. We put a few prompts in to get some sample messages, and it gave us something that wasn't terrible, right? Did we copy and paste that and put it into our CRM? No, we did not. But the hour and a half to 2 hours it would have taken to kind of look through things, etc., we just did in 15 seconds, right? We have the content knowledge to take that from fine to great, right? Because we know enough about it. But the time saved to think that is a tool in our tool belt is unbelievable, right? So how can we take items like that in our day-to-day to make things a little bit quicker, knowing that we should never rely on that? Number two, I worked with my team in a staff meeting last month where we took a personal statement prompt for one of our programs. It's pretty specific. It pulls a quote from an author and it asks you to respond to it. We put it in to see what a student's personal statement would be with a word count. And I said, okay, everyone, what do you think about this statement? Should we show this to our faculty review committee? And they said, this is pretty good. And so our next step is to say, all right, if that is the case where we think this is kind of un-AI-able, you don't hate what you just saw here, how do we then share this with some of our faculty as a heads up that something like this could be generated so quickly? We haven't gotten very far, but we're dipping our toes to help internally understand how to use it, and to help faculty, we're not experts in this either, just to know that this is possible in the review process.
Interesting. Rhonda, I think you had something that you had talked about, a conversation that we had.
Yeah, just sharing, we haven't talked about anything like that here on campus, other than I think our writing center has had some little sessions about it and how you can use it. Like Ryan said, it gives you some great content. I actually had to do a reference letter for a former colleague, and I put in hey, gym professional, X amount of years, looking for this position, and it gave me an amazing reference letter for this person. And I was able to just go in and kind of tweak it and personalize it or whatever, but I used some of the content from it because it was really good. So it has its advantages, but I think we have to figure out in higher ed, how do we put a bow on it? How do we, what parameters do we want to set around using AI? Because hey, it's phenomenal. I had a friend that she was like, hey, your dissertation should be a podcast. You should change it into a podcast. So I'm like, yeah, okay. Well, I'm like, that's going to take too much time. She typed in part of my title for my dissertation, put it in Chat GPT, and it gave a detailed, streamlined podcast outline for me to use. So it has its advantages, but again, like I said, we just have to figure out what parameters we want to set on people
Yeah.
using it in higher education. But I mean, it has its perks.
Go ahead, Jeremiah. I saw you
that's
come
from-
off mute.
Yeah, I'll say from the faculty side, I think over the summer, as Chat GPT became more widespread in the news, more and more faculty were in a bit of a tizzy about how to manage and incorporate that into their classroom experience. So no, I've never been worried about it personally, just because I organize my classes so that writing is about the experience that the students have had, and that would be very hard for ChatGPT to be able to complete in a way that would actually, accurately reflect what their experience was like without some pretty heavy duty editing. So, and I think that the lesson for that from a graduate enrollment management perspective is, if your school is using really generic prompts, don't be surprised that your essays are coming from ChatGPT, because students are super busy and it saves a mountain of time. So and I guess on the review side, if the amount of time that most reviewers are taking to read an essay is 30 seconds to a minute, they will never catch it. So
Exactly.
like you need to, if you're going to incorporate writing into your evaluation process, you need to make sure that you allocate enough time so that you can really, determine if this prompt is giving you what you want from it, and that you're able to discern whether or not this is an actual student writing, or if it's heavily influenced by the homogenization of the internet through the Chat GPT. So
Go
I
right
just
ahead,
want
Brian.
to jump in. I think to Jeremiah's point, taking that a step further, especially at the grad side, I have to wonder if in the next 1 or 2 years we see a real push towards, required interviews for small pools of students, as part of our review process. And what does that do for, the service levels of faculty, Jeremiah included, of how much time they've got to do that, to make sense of the essay component, to getting a real feel, especially if if you have 1 or 2 programs that are not as open, do not have as high of acceptance rates. How will we make sense of and incorporate those components into already processes we hope get through as quickly as possible? So just trying to think ahead.
one more thing to just pile on that. if many schools have phased out admissions tests, and I know there is a trend towards moving towards references instead of recommendations, and now the essay is homogenized because of ChatGPT, on what basis are we determining that a candidate is competitive? I'm just just saying something controversial there.
Have either of you experienced it, or you may not have even known because it's so good, in the admissions process? Like, have any of you, have students either asked about it, or have you all experienced it through the admissions process? And as I said, it may be the fact that they submitted an essay and it was so good that it was missed. But have any of you experienced it? No. Okay.
I don't think I've caught anybody using it.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the key word there.
On the processing side, right, we're trying to make sure an application is complete and full for whoever is next in the process to review, right? We might catch it if it's a 2-sentence statement, like, hey, we got to, hey, I think you missed something there. But if it's double spaced, a couple pages, we're going through so many to get them to those who are reading it in full. It'd be pretty hard to, unless the bolded top, this has come from, that, whatever website, it'd be tough at our, I think, at least from my perspective, at that point to catch it there.
Yeah. So I mean, I've been out of grad admissions for 10 years now. So this type of student I remember from 10 years ago may be very different than what you all are experiencing today. So what would you say in terms of the typical grad student or prospective grad student? You talk about their readiness and how prepared, their expectations that they're looking for now. And I'll even throw in their mental health. Are there things that you all see now as far as the typical student that's stepping through your doors or submitting applications to your programs? Whoever wants to jump in there is totally fine.
I'll start. I think that the students that we're seeing now, at least for me, they come with options for where they want to go, what they're looking for. What do you as an institution have to offer me that's better than institution B? A lot of them are focused, they are driven. They want it done. They want it done quickly. They're applying today. They're wanting an answer tomorrow, and different things like that. So I think like from the mental health perspective, I think they're more open with what they're going through as an adult or as an adult learner or someone coming from undergrad straight into grad. They're more willing to share. They share a lot of things they probably shouldn't share when they're going through that admissions process. So they're just more open. They come with more options. They want to know what makes you better than the next institution down the street. So they really do have options. So, and they want answers and funding, and they want it quickly.
I have a few things here, and the first one might be a hot take, right? And I want to be clear that from the grad side, for your original point, Kevin, or original question, if you are using the phrase enrollment cliff and grad enrollment management, you have missed the boat about the diverse range of audiences that our students are coming from, right? Right from undergrad, career changers, people who've been out of school for a while, right? Part-time, full-time, asynchronous, synchronous learning. So if you don't have 4 to 5 different versions of a typical student at this point, you may be missing out. And that comes with some caveats of, what school you're at, programs, faculties, and be mindful of that, right? But your version of that probably is multifaceted. However, to almost the flip side of what Naranda has shared, me and my team in our School of Education, we do more educating on how to be a strong applicant in the last 2 years than I think we ever have before, right? To ensure folks can get to the point that Naranda says, right? How to get strong letters of recommendation if you've been out of the workforce for 5 or 10 years or out of school, right? Explaining what goes into a personal statement that's not too personal, right? Where's the sweet spot? So we're almost teachers of grad school admissions processes, right? In some way, shape, or form. Shout out to Jess Calarco's A Field Guide to Grad School and some other things that are, resources out there. But to me, that is a key piece now, is that the typical student may need more coaching to help them get to a confident point of applying. Whereas before, the kind of capitals behind the scenes for, a typical student came from, parents, counselors, kind of this social support they had, where as we diversify our pools of students, we need to meet them where they're at to help them get along the way. And that means our jobs are changing significantly of how we're guiding someone through, or how we're helping guide them to get an application in to feel confident that they can take a transition into grad school as well.
I'll jump back in, Jeremiah, before you say something. Right, you work with educators within the School of Education. Those are the most difficult applicants. In my nearly 16 years of higher ed, working with applicants that are teachers, administrators in K through 12, they don't follow directions. They don't listen. Like I tell them all, would you go through this with a student in your classroom? So I think too, that population for me, for College of Education, at my previous institution, the College of Education was the bane of my existence in graduate admissions. And it's shaping out that way here at my new institution. Been here about 18 months now. It's the same. It's like, y'all don't read, you don't listen. So you do, and that population, I completely agree with what you just said. Like it's more It's more with educators. Absolutely.
I'm glad this is recorded, so I have proof of some of the things.
You can now use it, right? You can go to the dean of the School of Education and say, listen.
I feel you.
Now, are you all seeing any changes in how students are making their decision to attend one of your schools? I know for me, it was really, how quick can I get through this program? How much is it going to cost? And is it convenient? Those were the three things that I typically remember students really being focused on. Are you all seeing new things, or are there other things that you all are seeing besides those?
I mean, the thing that has been true for the business school world for a long time, I think, is kind of becoming true for all graduate enrollment management, that career outcomes and expectations around what this degree is actually going to lead to are much, much more front and center than they've ever been before. So, students are not satisfied knowing that they're going to become an expert in whatever this field is. They also want to know, what are the career support services? How am I going to leverage this degree? What access to networking and career resources am I going to be able to get in addition to this kind of learning experience? And in a way, that's a good thing, because it seems that's what the government is going to be expecting all of us to be reporting on as well. So for schools that have not historically maintained really good kind of alumni outcomes data, they're all going to need to get on the stick sooner than later.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Ryan, I saw you. Go right ahead, Ryan.
Oh, no, I think another piece to this is that, I'm going to frame this, there are a council of grad schools. There's been this handshake agreement about April 15th being a deadline for fall programs for so long. In recent years, because of, again, legal and procedural changes, students are empowered to make decisions beyond that now, even with an offer of funding from a school. For those who work with PhD programs, maybe in other related health areas, especially students, if they happen to get a better offer or change decisions from April to August now, have more power than ever to do that. So from a yield and melt standpoint, we've got to be, to Jeremiah's point, have that data ready and be more flexible to have to go back into our pools, have longer wait lists, et cetera. So, students are better, smarter consumers, for lack of a better term now, and have the power to use that knowledge in more diverse ways than ever before. So that is recent, and it causes us to have to be fluid and flexible for far longer times than we may have historically anticipated as well.
Yeah, for sure.
I think too, I've noticed over the last few years, students with that are applying for capacity limit programs or these specialist programs and physical therapy and nursing, and they'll pay a deposit, and if their next institution that they think is a little bit better than yours, or they offer them a little bit more money than yours, they'll forfeit a $500 deposit that goes to the next institution. So, which is mind-blowing to me, but I see it every day. Now, physical therapy, occupational therapy, physician assistant, like they will forfeit a $250, $500, sometimes $700 deposit just to go to that next institution.
I used to say the same exact thing. Our social work program had a $350 deposit, and in many cases, students would, submit that deposit and not show up, or just decide that they wanted to go somewhere else, and it was non-refundable. And for the most case, you have a lot of students who are coming to grad school looking for funding, and then you have students that have $350 that are just like, it's all right, I'm good. I'm going somewhere else. So it is, it's interesting. Now, Ryan, you had mentioned before the enrollment cliff and sort of the way it should be interpreted and sort of looked at on the grad side. Any things that you all feel or see how it's going to impact the grad admissions cycle, or just graduate enrollment at your institutions?
I think for me, it's putting more emphasis on graduate education, because at my institution, grad is pulling the weight for enrollment for the institution. Where undergrad increased 2% and grad increased 16%. So that more focus is, all right, like, our institution by 2030, they want to grow to 16,000 students. We have 10,000 right now. So, and they're looking for that growth to come in graduate education because they know it's not coming in undergrad. So it's more emphasis on graduate and how can we grow graduate programs? What are we doing for graduate programs? But where's the funding?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where we are right now. It's like graduate education is being looked at to bring in more students. And what are you doing to bring in more students? Where it's like we're admitting students up into the last minute in some grad programs, which drives me insane. But it's like, all right, this is where these numbers, this is where our money's going to come because that undergrad population is dwindling.
Yeah, and it's the light at the end of the tunnel that's sort of coming, that has been talked about, and it's coming closer and closer and closer. So I have a as Ryan, you described one of your responses before as sort of a hot take. So this one I think is going to be a question that I think will garner a lot of discussion, is the how you all would describe the alignment or misalignment with the demands that you all have in grad admissions and the support and resource that you have for grad. And I remember for me, you come from an institution where grad or undergrad is typically the lead off batter, and grad is typically somewhere later on down the line. It's tough. Grad usually doesn't have the same resources or things that an undergrad office has. So how would you all describe that and sort of what you see is needed, whether it be at your institution or just in general, as you start to think about the support and resources that grad has?
I mean, it hasn't changed since your
Right.
experience. That is for sure. I think it is incumbent upon us as enrollment management people, I think, to make our case in a really quantified and persuasive way, because the mindset is the money comes from this pool. But if in fact, as Naranda said, that the revenue that's primarily being generated, I mean, if this pool is creating most of the revenue but only consuming this amount of the resources, then that should be a measurable item. So I would say, number one, don't accept don't accept your circumstances if you have the data to back it up. And if you don't have the data, you need to start getting the data, because it's tough. And I mean, we talk about this collectively in graduate enrollment management, like every time we get together, because it is a persistent challenge that we are unable to do the work that's being expected. And so, unfortunately, campuses still are struggling with this space.
And to that point, this is not an easy go out and get right now, but to the data point, I want folks who are on the grad enrollment side, depending where you're sitting at the table, to think about heads, credits, and revenue interchangeably, right? So often we say we have head count goals, but if those 100 students are only taking one course at a time, and it's how are you interpreting that, or being at the table to explain the misalignment again of what you're being asked to do and what it's not delivering. Or if you're doing more than you're expected to because you're getting a few number of students that are all full time and that takes up X amount of your labor or your capital, how are you making sense of that? So folks get that we are not a one size fits all. We're never a one size fits all approach, especially at the grad level. If you're in a central office or even a decentralized one, that you're meeting students where they're at, and there's not a 1-to-1 ratio there, and it takes quite a bit of art and science to meet your goals every year. So I think that's a really important part of it, as you want to come to give your dean, your director, whoever it is, the information to show your value or your office's value too.
I just want to throw in a quick anecdote. I'll try and be brief, but we have NAGAP has a community virtual space where people can pose questions to the community and people chime in and share advice on experiences. We call it the exchange. And basically, there was, in the last couple of days, a school, I won't say which school, but a school that has essentially become more than 60% graduate and is now 40% undergraduate.
Mm.
And historically, graduate enrollment has been managed in decisions, and process has been managed by the faculty, but it is trying to be kind of assumed by the centralized office, because it is, I mean, in effect, the school, right? I mean, if you represent 60% of the enrollment, and this was, you know, spread out across different permutations of one program. So it's like, if that one program is the school at this point, don't be surprised that the centralized office is going to try and, you know, assume more influence, because your success is their success.
That's
so,
right.
you know, to spin it around and say, well, if your success is their success, what have you done for me lately to help us collectively, you know, achieve the goals that we have shared together? So
I've had probably over the 10 years that I've been with Carnegie and talking with folks from the grad side, it's just always been sort of the administration will come to director of grad and say, so are you able to bring in another 25 or 30 students, but we're still going to leave you with the same budget that you have to do it. And that has always been the big, I guess, sort of, you know, the shake your head moment and think, well, how do you think I'm going to do this? Oh, I'm just going to reach into that drawer that I had that I've been holding on all these applications and these students and magically make them appear. But yeah, it's a challenge for sure. That like you said, it hasn't changed, and it's still the same even today.
Well, one other thing that, just to pile on and give a kind of an amen to that, is the mindset that you can add 30 people and not have any additional financial aid, but also that you can add 30 people and not recognize, and this has been, I've been in this business a long time, right? A constant issue for me is spending 10,000 to get 100,000 in revenue. Like the mindset of, don't you see that this will be 90,000 positive if we can squeeze 10,000 out on the front? You know, like that mindset of just investing in where you see that there is returns is, you know, a struggle to communicate.
Yeah.
I would take that, you know, I think an important part too, when we're thinking about this, having these conversations, right? I'm in education, right? There are folks who might be in medicine, dental, you know, healthcare professions, counseling, that require clinical hours too, right? If someone to come say, well, double your cohort of that, I would love to find a place to bring 30 more student teachers, but there's only so many places
That's right.
to get them the internship or practical experiences that they need. And I hate that this is not to pile on, but right, we have this unique intersection of needing to think about all these layers, especially, and I think in the enrollment seat, we might be uniquely intertwined to ask a lot of, or be kind of the fly in the ointment when it comes to these decisions, because we notice and see all these components where it's sometimes not as simple as that because of these pieces. And we're trying, and it's not a 4-year program, it's a 1 or 2 year that we've got to be ready to turn this stuff around for. So it's such a challenging but exciting way to approach things too.
Great insight. So I want to ask about international, because, you know, I'm sure each of you in your own unique ways over the past 3 years have seen either your international populations dwindle because of COVID and all sorts of other things. But what trends are you all seeing and experiencing with your international students at this stage right now? Is there a bounce back happening? Is it still sort of where it was before? Has it taken a nosedive? What sort of things are you all experiencing with your international populations?
I think for me, here at my institution, we see a lot more than one applying. The issue is when them being able to get here. They're having lots of issues with getting their visas and different things like that to even come to the States. We have, I don't know how many students every semester that we have to defer. Some we've deferred 2 and 3 times during this COVID because they can't get appointments, or they get appointments and it's denied. So a lot of the interest is there. It is coming back. They're getting a lot more applicants because we have a lot of medical programs. We have biomedical science and dentistry programs and different things like that here at Augusta University. So the interest is there, but just them getting here has been the biggest issue of the last couple of years.
Ryan or Jeremiah, either you have things that you're starting to see with your international operations?
I think to Naranda's point, we have had to implement more like check-ins to ensure someone is still planning on coming through like forms, emails, reply to this by X date to ensure someone is on the pathway to getting, we've given them the documents needed for their visa, but to get a visa appointment, to get through administrative processing, writing letters to make sure that it happens, you know, that we've had to do more of that work, that manual work than we ever have before. And again, even with that, you know, folks not showing, and it's nothing that they've done wrong. It is just a bureaucratic, you know, not nightmare, but you know, the hoops to jump through. And if we wanted, to your earlier point, support students, we have to be prepared to think about those things, A, for our own good, and B, to make sure these individuals who are coming to a new country and or making major life changes feel supported to the best we can along the way.
I'll just throw in, I think that certainly it feels like interest is back. So there's certainly a higher volume of interest in coming to study in the United States. I think that the overall climate has become more accessible in terms of getting a job afterwards, which is usually one of the driving factors for coming to the United States to get a master's degree or a PhD, is because there's a job at the end of the tunnel. So, you know, at least the expectations that there are, you know, work visas available at the end of their endeavor seems to be better. So that is certainly helping. But I think, as you heard, it's a pipeline and processing hurdle more than anything else at this point, from my perspective.
Yeah, one of the things that I always think about with international is, you know, there's campuses that, you know, certainly want to have more international students come, but I always think about the flip side of that is are we ready for international students to come? Are we prepared for them to come? Do we have airport pickup? Do we have housing? Do we have all those things that happen, you know, for an international student that they may need when all the other students go home on breaks, you know? So there's a lot of other things that I think a campus needs to also consider when they say, oh, we want more international students. Can we get more international students? It's a matter of having resources and things available for those students also, so that those students, sort of like what you said, Jeremiah, is making sure that they feel welcomed and feel like they're accepted and wanted on that campus. So I know I used to go through, you know, situations where, you know, you have a group of students that came together from the same area, same town. And if one is not having an experience that they feel is up to what they were expecting, they're going to leave, and they're going to leave with the folks they came with. So it's not like you're losing one, you may lose 4 all going to another school because the one student may have felt that they weren't getting, or they just didn't feel as though this was the right match for them. At this point, I want to open up the floor to any folks out in the that are here and joined us today, if they have any questions that they want to throw into the chat. But I'm going to throw one last thing out to you all on the panel. If there's any new graduate admissions folks that are here today that are just starting and saying, wow, I just listened to all this, I'm scared. Is there any advice that you all think, and I know I'm throwing this sort of out of the blue, but I'm sure with all your experience that there's things that you wish you may have known or would love to pass down to someone who's in the new to the graduate admission space. Is there anything that you'd want to throw out to them as, hey, here's some things that you should do? And I would definitely using NAGAP, I would say is number one as a
Yeah.
resource to use that as a resource for you. But anything you all want to pass down to someone who's brand new to grad admissions?
Yeah, I mean, shameless plug, right? You got to find your community, and there, if your institution does not support membership widely, start advocating for that, because I mean, from my own experience, there is nothing like having a community of people to complain to ask advice from, to get support and love and care from, because many of us in graduate enrollment sit in a space where we are the only one. And that is a very challenging place to be, especially as demands get cranked up, as we've talked about. So if you can't join NAGAP, which I strongly encourage you to try to do, there's often chapters that you can engage with, at least on a professional development space, and even on your campus. Put together a group of 5 or 6 people that work across different departments and get together on a monthly basis just to exchange challenges, ideas, problem solving, all that kind of stuff. It will feed your soul in a way that you can't anticipate on the front end.
100% agree with that.
And I just echo what Jeremiah said. For me, when I started in higher education, I had no idea I wanted to do higher education. I just moved to Georgia with my husband, trying to figure out what I wanted to do after the military. And I just kind of fell into graduate education and fell in love with it. And I realized I used to call my office, had a cubicle in the undergrad side of the office. And I was just like, this is my little grad island, my little cubicle back there. So when I was exposed to NAGAP, it was like a lifeline for me. I truly, truly love NAGAP. I love the organization. I love what it stands for and what it does for graduate enrollment management professionals. It has opened doors for me as a professional, allow me to develop friendships, relationships, people that I can call on speed dial or shoot an email, and I'm not going to get a response about something that I'm dealing with in graduate education. Like Jeremiah said, shameless plug, but NAGAP is, I mean, it's been tremendous for me as a higher ed professional. So I would strongly, strongly encourage you to attend if you can't, or join. Summit next year is in Louisville, Kentucky. We're going to do the Bourbon Trail. Feel free to join us there. But yeah, we're super excited about NAGAP. And if you can't join NAGAP, get involved in one of the regional chapters, nagap.org. You can go on the website. You can look and see what chapters in your region to just join and become a part of it, and just kind of just get that professional development and build that community, that network that Jeremiah spoke of.
You've definitely had some support here, reaching out to your community, wherever that looks like, to receive advice, feedback, complain to. Absolutely, you're getting some support there. We did have one question come through. For less mainstream majors, what are your go-tos for recruitment?
And I'm sure we all have those on your in your portfolio of programs. So, and they're probably the squeakiest wheel too. They probably want the most students and want the most money and support to their program, right?
I think
That's
for
right.
those programs, I think building a network at other institutions with graduate faculty or graduate enrollment management professionals or other campuses that may have that program on their campus at the undergrad level, just to build that connection and make that, try to build a pipeline for you to get those students to come into your grad programs. Going and speaking in their classes, whether it's in person or virtual, going to recruitment fairs on those campuses and setting aside time to actually go to that classroom and speak with those students and talk about your program and the benefits of your program at your institution, I think have been great for some of the programs at my previous institution that were kind of low on the enrollment poll, so to speak. Just kind of building those connections and building those pipelines with programs at other institutions and tapping into HBCUs and minority serving institutions, tapping into those because they have some of those programs at the undergrad level that you don't see at other institutions, and you may be able to build that relationship on those campuses.
Yeah, to add to that point, something, you know, education, we've got some niche programs, right? There's a couple things I think about. One, what are the professional organizations that those folks end up going into, and how are there now? And are you looking to build a list of prospects? Or are you looking to kind of get the word out in terms of branding and kind of broad outreach, right? You know, are you going to buy an ad just so people know you exist? Or are you trying to get in front of folks too? So sometimes those professional orgs are the first to build that network if those networks that Naranda mentioned don't exist. And I mean, the nitty gritty of it is looking at chairs and directors of nearby programs, right? And being ready to send emails, right? It's a boots on the ground approach that you need to do to start. You know, you start with one and you build from there. But you know, that's the unique component, is we don't often have lists to buy. We don't have somewhere to go to just make that happen. And in some places, you may need to get real creative with your Google searches to see what types of public data might be available, right? I'll give you an example, right? I've got a teacher or a principal preparation program. You know, New York State has a list of every principal and superintendent that's in a public school in New York State that you can download, right? Wow. I'm going to let them know to tell me, you know, I email those folks, they tell me teachers that might be great that want to be in our program, right? But that's just taking time to figure out what exists out there as you dig deep into like the niche of what makes your program, you know, happen. So
got to be creative. That is number one. Got to be creative. Jeremiah, did you want to add something there?
I'll just throw in a little bit of a twist for those that maybe are thinking about how to get unique or diverse candidates from different backgrounds into your program. So that's just another way to think about it. I had some really good luck just creating some targeted scholarship application opportunities where people were able to self-identify their interest in a niche area that would add to the diversity of my programs by submitting an application for the scholarship money that we already award. You know, it wasn't new money necessarily, but I had just decided that I valued having those. Just for example, having healthcare people in an MBA is not a lot of them apply, but they add a tremendous, very important perspective. And so I was willing to dedicate some of my funding to, you know, to prioritize giving them some space.
Excellent. I think we have one more, right?
One final question, and then we're going to call it here. How important is graduate housing for full-time master's programs at this time? What advice would you have for making a compelling case to administration to make larger investments in graduate student on-campus housing?
Just a general answer, I guess, is it depends on where you are. The question of how important it is. You know, in Charlotte, North Carolina, not that important because we have hundreds of thousands of apartments available. Not necessarily inexpensive, but certainly lots of available housing. But, you know, our president, the NAGAP president, is in the middle of Arkansas. And they're, you know, a different level of availability in terms of housing and that kind of thing. So maybe more important for her than it is for me in Charlotte. I mean, I think everything comes down to a case being made, right? If you can provide data that supports the case that you've lost, you know, this number of students because they couldn't figure out the housing solution, or that students came and ended up leaving because they couldn't afford to live on what we paid them as a graduate student. I mean, those kinds of both anecdotal, but even more importantly, you know, kind of exit data or non-attender data can really help you kind of make a compelling case for at least finding a solution, even if it's not, you know, investing $50 million in a building. Maybe that's not possible, but at least investing in finding a way to offer those students an option to address that need.
Absolutely. And I hate to cut this great discussion off. This has just been really wonderful. Thank you to our whole panel for joining us today.
Thank you.
For attendees, if you are available, we have another session starting in 1 minute with UPSIA, Engaging the New Adult Learner. Don't hesitate to look at tomorrow's sessions on the Whova app and reach out with any questions. Thanks for joining us in today's discussion.
Thanks, everybody.